Hello, my friends, and welcome to PostScript. It's so nice to have you with us here. It's a very sunny, beautiful fall day in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. And today we've got a chance to talk with a wonderful journalist, Michael Yon. Hi, Michael. How are you, my friend?
Hello from Panama. It's been a while since I've been to West Virginia. Not too long, maybe a year.
Yeah. Well, we hope maybe you'll come back again. Michael, you're one of the last real journalists in the world. I mean, certainly in terms of Americans, you're up there with Cy Hirsch and Glenn Greenwald and a few of those guys that really do journalism still. And so we're honored to have you here in a PostScript interview. And what I wanted to talk to you a little bit in the short time that we have available to us is not the current affairs, which is what you're really quite expert in, but something that we here at the Arlington Institute are particularly interested in, and that's the future. And where is this all going? And what is setting up? And what's the next 2 or 3 years of coming together? And we're pleased that we caught you down in Panama here for a few minutes. And so tell us a little bit about what the big picture is, if you will.
Big picture, clearly the global situation is being rearranged. All the big pieces on the board are being rearranged. We can see, for instance, a huge amount of demographic sloshing around, which is quite intentional. I mean, the United States, of course, is being invaded. But what does that leave for the United States? And Europe is being invaded, and attempting the same with Japan and other places. Well, demography is a huge part of anybody's future, if not the largest part of it. And so what we see now is a totally rework of the system. I mean, the fall of Rome was well, the Goths,
Yeah, yeah.
basically invaded, right? And so, I mean, and weaponized migration doesn't mean necessarily that aliens come in with weapons. It's just the actual coming in sufficient numbers is enough to change the whole situation.
The whole
And that's what's
fabric.
happening now.
Yeah, the
Right.
fabric of
And
society. Yeah, and all this
that's
is.
right.
Yeah, Michael, we're big fans of Martin Armstrong. You may know of him, an economist down in Florida who's got a computer program, an AI computer program that he designed 40 years ago that has never been wrong in 40 years and being able to predict economic and financial and geopolitical and other kinds of things. Martin Armstrong's computer, he calls it Socrates, says that and he anticipated this and talked about it more than a year ago, said that we'd be in the middle of World War III right now, and that between 2025 and 2027, there will be a global civil war, which would be a general uprising of people across the planet against their governments. And it kind of pivots around the concept and the idea of betrayal, that we've kind of been screwed, that we trusted you and gave you our money and our trust, and you took advantage of us and you've lied to us. And is that, do you see anything like that in where you're going? Because you've just been all over the world and you're in all the hot spots.
Yeah, it's clear that we're going into global food issues, which are man-made. That we're going to go into all sorts of issues that are man-made, that are intentionally being created. For instance, even weaponization of mosquitoes is ongoing. And all sorts of little parts to the puzzle, which are part of a larger puzzle. And of course, then there's just the normal background noise that's always going on as well. I likened it to, in some cases, let's say, with a lot of the puppets who are in various offices, whether that's Canada or Washington or Texas or Netherlands. I mean, somebody's operating the strings, but they're also doing so in hurricane winds, right? I mean, there's also the normal background noise of life, and those sorts of things that are going on. But the bottom line is there will be food shortages. This human osmotic pressure, the push and the pull of migration, is intensifying. The hop, and also not just the human osmotic pressure is intensifying, but the facilitation to move is increasing. The intentional facilitation to move. For instance, down here in Panama, the Darien Gap, where I spend so many months, probably 6 months since Biden was installed, you see the facilitation They're building 2 new camps in the jungle now. I was just out at one of them with a mutual friend looking at it, and that camp is growing dramatically, or the new camp will be the biggest so far. Nobody's in it yet, but the Imbara Indians down there have cut about 60 to 80 acres out of the jungle with machetes for new aliens coming in.
So where's that all going? Where's that going to end up? What's it going to look like in a year based upon what you see?
Well, with the clear paths, I mean, physical paths, and also the information paths that people know more and more how to get. If you can get into South America, or you're already in South America, it's very simple to get to anywhere in the United States. That's child's play. All you have to do is get to South America or be in South America. It doesn't matter where you're at in South America. You can be up in Alaska, lickety split. You can be up in Key West. It's no problem. And in fact, we're seeing a good 3,000 to 5,000 a day cross through the Darien Gap now, but those numbers are dramatically increasing. And keep in mind, these numbers were unimaginable for most people a few years ago, but not for my small team, because that's why we keep coming here, because we've been warning that this would happen. Now this is here. And that, I mean, when we used to come here, people would be stunned when there would be like 100 or 200 a day. They're like, that's incredible numbers. That's even up to 6,000 a month. Now it can be 6,000 in one day, right? And that number is only increasing. I'm telling you, it'll be 10,000 a day at this rate by about roughly January or February in dry season. And it'll only continue to increase from there. I mean, we could easily get to, I was just talking with Steve Bannon and some others this morning, they could easily get to 1 million a month by 2025. Will it actually do that? I do not know. However, I do see how to get there. And it's very clear that other people see how to get there, who are the people who are down here, and they're working to make that happen, right? They're not just like, and I see how to do it. They see how to do it, and they're like literally building a bridge over this river that they need to cross.
Right. But where's there? What is a year from now? What is this contributing to? What kind of a United States is going to come up, be a product of all of this?
Oh, destruction of the United States, surely, at this rate. At this rate, United States and Europe will be gone. I mean, I spent more than 6 years running around Europe. I'm quite familiar with Europe. I spent many more years than that, probably, I don't know, 17 or 18 running around Asia, like a year in China, in and around China, a year in India, a year in Nepal. I mean, I've been all over these places, and I'm quite familiar with a lot of the situation going on, and who's who in the zoo, let's say. And I do realize I've learned a lot in all these. I've spent most of my life out of the United States, right? In more than 90 countries. Actually, I'm not talking about airport stops, but actually going there, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I've seen is I've learned a lot. One is some fish don't mix well in the same aquarium. I mean, it just doesn't work, right? On the fish chart. and then the only cult people never see. I've studied cults quite a lot because of some of the things I do. But one of the things I found too is that the only cult people will never see is a cult that they're actually in, right? I mean, you can see everybody else's cult, like, hey, that guy's in a cult, right? And poor guy, But and another thing is if the cult is a malicious cult and it's a powerful, psychologically powerful cult, there's nothing at all that people in that cult will not do. And I mean nothing. I mean, they'll hold up their babies and vax them and put it on Instagram, right? That's the equivalent in Aztec days of just throwing your baby down the steps. That's literally, I mean, most of Israel got vaxxed. I mean, that was cult behavior. Straight up cult, that was drink the Kool-Aid, right? And die. Right. And so, in fact, that was when they did that, and I could not return to Israel. I said, well, I'm not any country that forces me to vax, I'm never going back. Right. And I'm not going back. If I get shot covering that war, I might get infused with, vax blood. So, I mean, but what I'm getting to is there's nothing that a cult won't do. There is a clear eugenicist cult. There is a clear cult to reduce the population of people on Earth. And there is nothing they won't do. Roll out death jabs, start wars, cause huge migrations. And now what's the end state of this and why would they do it? I can't read their minds, right? But Well, I'll leave that to others. But what is clear is that they are doing it.
Well, that you said one end state was the destruction or the implosion of the United States. I mean, that's what Martin Armstrong and guys like Cliff High and some other folks all have come to the conclusion, and say that sometime after 2027, the United States, as we understand it, goes away. And in Armstrong's case, he says that between then and 2032, about 5 or 6 other countries manifest themselves in North America. I mean, does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, I can see that easily. And I see the ecosystem. Keep in mind, I have had sufficient experience around the world to see, some countries are clearly very, let's say, aggressive. Let's say cultures, actually, not like, for instance, the Chinese Communist Party is a clear cult, right? And this is very important, what I'll say about the Chinese Communist Party. They believe that everybody with Chinese genes falls under their dominion, under their law, right? Under their sovereign law, right? That means people who's Cantonese speaking Chinese who have been in Panama for 150, 170 years. They've never been to China. They're never going to go to China. But the Chinese Communist Party claims, hey, you're our blood. You fall under our law, right? And the same thing all over the world. Chinese communities, people who will never go to China, their grandparents never went to China. But the Chinese Communist Party claims that even though they're multi-generations out of China, they're part of China. Where does this go? Take it a little further. The Chinese Communist Party is crystal clear that Native Americans, who they claim came across the Bering Straits and populated North America and all the way through Mexico down to the tip of South America, are actually Chinese, right? They're actually Chinese migrants. So their claim is that all of North and South America, so where I'm at now, Panama, are all Chinese. They're all basically Chinese migrants, and we stole their land. You can see where they're going with that. So that's one ecosystem, right? And so there's the Chinese. They clear one time. One time, let me tell you a quick story. One time I was up in Kashmir, and I was staying with this Muslim family for about a week. They had a houseboat up in Srinagar, and the Muslim guy told me one night, he goes, God keeps people in 3 jars. In the first jar, he keeps the American, and he keeps that lid very, very tight because the Americans want to get out and rule the world. And I said, well, that's true. And he goes, in the second jar, he keeps the Europeans. He doesn't keep that lid very tight because the Europeans want to rule the world too, but they don't try very hard. I was like, that's true. I lived in Europe more than 6 years. And he goes, in the third jar, he keeps the Indians. He doesn't even keep a lid on that jar. The Indians want to rule the world too, but every time one of them almost gets out, the rest pull him back down. I said, that's the truest stuff. That's the truest thing I've heard in years. I told him, we kept laughing about it. We talked all night about stuff like that. And I was like, it's true. I go around the world and I see different groups that do want to rule the world. And there are a few that have an honest go at it. They're really at least can make a huge impact as they try. Chinese Communist Party is one of those. Now they work in collusion very tightly with the World Economic Forum, which obviously is making a go at it as well. Eventually, these two will fight because remember, Chinese Communist Party is ultra racist. I mean, when I was in Hong Kong in those last 7 months before I got kicked out in 2020 from Hong Kong. I was a bad boy, watching and publishing about what was happening there. So they finally took me to the airport and put me on an airplane and kicked me out. But the bottom line is the Hong Kongers called the Chinese Communist Party, the Han Chinese, the Mandarin speakers there, they called them Chi-Nazis, right? So I asked them, why do you call them Chi-Nazis? I asked maybe 20 people the same question at different times to, see if I was getting different answers. And they all were like, well, fascism is when industry and government are just consanguinated to the point where you can't tell them apart. And then what is Nazism? You take fascism and add a big racial component, right? And so that was actually what would be described as Nazism. There was the big F fascism in Italy, but there's the little f, which is, that the idea of government and business just being commingled, which is actually the normal progression of things. But the point is that the Chi-Nazis are now working together with the World Economic Forum, but they both know these are both sophisticated players and they're both shrewd. This is ISIS and Al Qaeda cooperating, right? And so eventually they will kill each other after they come for us. And that's clear. And they're going to, for instance, Panama. I'm sitting right beside the Panama Canal now. Panama is vital terrain for planet Earth when it comes to global trade, right? As is Netherlands. Often I leave here and go to Netherlands. But the Panama Canal is right outside the window, right? So the Panama Canal is here. China and the World Economic Forum are making a solid go at Panama, right? They're working. You'll see Chinese signs all over the place, investment. Anyway, long story short, this is a pork chop around Panama's neck. And I tell members of the Panamanian government, beware. This is a big pork chop, and the idea that you have some sovereignty and it's guaranteed because it's written on some paper is nonsense. You got pork chops hanging around your neck. One is Highway 1, which will be connected with Colombia. Actually, the Panamanian government's helping with that. I was just down there droning a bridge that they're putting in to extend Highway 1, the Pan American Highway, into. Right now, there's no road that connects South America with Panama. That's why they call it the Darien Gap. It's a gap because there's no roads for about 60 miles. But both sides are working to connect that. And when they do, that's another pork chop around their neck. And then there's a lot of other things here. There's energy, there's the wood that they're destroying the jungles, and there's gold. And I mean, there's the location. This is one of the most vital locations on it. That's why Poland always gets invaded, location, or Hawaii is so important. Netherlands. What I'm getting to is there is a clear rearrangement of global powers, and the elephants are fighting, and a lot of ants are going to get flattened.
All right. Well, in the process, now you've already talked about some things. You talked about food and the fact that there are going to be shortages of food. You've been talking about that for quite some time. Are there other kind of areas? Where do you see? Are there energy issues? What are the other kind of contributing factors that turn into the implosion of the world that we know, in the next couple or 3 years?
Well, continued wars. There's a lot of energy in the system, and there's more energy being added to the system. I mean, there's basically bowling balls flying around at increasing speeds here, and things are going to get broken. And for instance, eventually you'll probably see a war with, just as one example of many, a war between, say, Venezuela and Guyana. I think there'll be a war there eventually. It'll be energy related and some other things. But the bottom line is there's a lot of things like that going on. And there's a lot of some war, obviously, is just based on people hating each other, blood hate, religion, resources, just being neighbors. But, for instance, let's say Venezuela again, talking about that again. Most of the people coming through the gap right now are Venezuelans. Now, a lot of Venezuelans, actually, believe it or not, are Arabs. They're actually, a lot of them are Hezbollah, actually. And so there's a lot of Hezbollah in Venezuela and Peru and other places like that. But many of them speak Spanish completely fluently and natively with native body language, right? You can't distinguish them because they were born there. And so so they can come across the gap in any numbers that they care to come across in. And so you see what's happening now in Israel, of course, and other. I mean, while people move to the United States to do their new land grabs, I mean, this is what this is. America is a big land grab right now, like it was, in the old days when people are going out and staking their claim. That's what's happening right now. And keep in mind, a lot of these Chinese, again, they are being taught that this is your land. Just go up there and take it back. They stole it from our ancestors. It's ours. The moon is ours. The whole Pacific Ocean is ours. Wow. Hawaii is ours. Okinawa is ours. I'll be in Okinawa again soon on this very issue, and Ishigaki Island and other places. They are going for it. That's just one monster. There are others, of course.
So do you see other kind of separatist kind of wars and things happening or growing in intensity as we go forward?
Clearly, the United States easily could split. I mean, you constantly see people say, "Well, just let California go its way." I'm like, no, cease fire on that. You'll have a Chinese naval base in San Francisco. that means you'll have a million Chinese suddenly in San Francisco or California. You know what I mean? It's not like, hey, it'll just be the way it is, which is already terrible, and huge influx of. I mean, there's Reconquista and all these other things going on. There's who's who in the zoo, right? Nobody runs the jungle, right? But people sure fight over pieces of it. And in California, Oregon, Washington, all that, and that part of all of Canada is up for grabs at this point, mostly because weak men make hard times. And we've come into some period where people, a sufficient number of people, have lost any grounding in any reality whatsoever. And part of this is intentional brainwashing, and part of it, I think, it's just what nothing new really is under the sun, is it? I mean, everything. I read a lot of old books. And I just read a book from the 1880s about yellow fever vaccination, and it's from from smallpox, and it was I just was reading a book from that time period about yellow fever as well. But when you read this book from the 1880s, I can send it to you. It's like it was written this morning. There's like just change some names and some dates. Same thing.
Yeah. But there's difference, and that is the metabolism of the whole system. You've got the internet, you've got all this social media stuff. You have the ability to, yes, yeah. You have the ability to control and shift and influence the narrative in ways that you never could before. You get this kind of volatility associated with the whole system because of faster and so on. No, and it's really rather dangerous in kind of fundamental intrinsic ways going forward. The question is, can you manage it? Can you somehow stay ahead of it, or does it essentially bring the whole system down?
We're going to an entropic. I mean, entropy is clearly increasing. It's funny. I look at the beautiful galaxy behind you, and it makes me think about what we're talking about. You know what I mean? There are, clearly there'll be organization, right? But we're going to clearly see a fire. We're going to see a lot of fire unfold, right? There's going to be some severe turbulence, unpredictable, right? And then out of that will come some new order, which is their clear intent. But their intent, of course, is to who are they? There's a lot of different theirs. There's certain sects of Islam that would love to rule the universe or the world, and then there's others who would, China wants to rule the land and space, right? And the World Economic Forum, I'm not sure. The more you look at them, the more confusing they get. They clearly are looking to destroy everything that they love to run around in. Some of the World Economic Forum just appears straight up evil. Yeah. The older I get, the more I realize there actually is something. There's like an evil force. Maybe it should be like a big E in math or something. I don't know.
Yeah, right. But is there something about this kind of period of time, the kind of the zeitgeist or the feeling or the something that you're seeing that you never saw before, that gives you some kind of indication of the direction where everything is going? Or is this just kind of the random things that are just happening at this time?
I think we're going through things that our ancestors went through. We're just going through them on a much bigger scale with much more access to information. So everything's accelerated. There's more energy in the system, and things can get very energetic, especially with the sorts of weapons that we have now, right? That we didn't have in the past. So, I mean, but the general behaviors seem to be the same. Again, when you read some of these, I constantly read old books, and at some point I just come to the realization that really nothing has changed. I mean, like an alligator behaved the same way 300 years ago, probably, or 8,000 years ago, that it does now.
They weren't doing genetic modification, and they weren't putting bots into your brain, and they weren't connecting you up to the cloud, and they weren't monitoring everything that you did everywhere. They weren't kind of into your brain until putting ideas and things and in your brain. I mean, there's qualitatively just a whole different kind of space.
Yeah, that's true.
Driven by technology here that is heading this in a direction that minor ways maybe in the past they've done it, but this is a really big push into a space that we seem not to ever been before.
Can I mention genetic? And I've thought about this a lot when I go for walks. Actually, I mean, we've never been able to gene splice and that sort of thing before, but obviously, humankind is, and animals themselves and plants, I'm sure, are constantly doing their own genetic modifications. For instance, in which mates you try to draw and select, right? And the genocides that happen. It's just been like an organic, let's say, uh, genetic modification, not with some tools and
Right,
instruments
right.
and chemicals or whatever, but it has happened. It's just been done like organically,
Yeah,
right?
but it's long, a long period of time and other kinds of stuff. And it's where there's a lot of opportunity for adaptation and such, which is not the case now. I mean, you got a whole bunch of kids running around who don't know whether they're men or women or boys or
Exactly.
girls or other kinds of stuff. And it's kind of mind-boggling, but the
But this
ultimate.
has happened before too. The gaslighting on a grand scale has happened. These people that think that they're so smart and doing genetic modification and all this. And well, look what just happened with the death jab. I mean, but I often say to them, look, I'm often out in the hot and the cold and that sort of thing, and the wet and the dry. And my favorite material is wool, right? Wool, really good wool, right? And and I was saying to some of these virologists 2 or 3 years ago, like, you can't even beat wool that a sheep makes, and you're telling me that you can come up and just magically come up with some new vaccine to beat virus? I mean, these viruses are sophisticated. This is like this is nothing to. You can't even beat wool. The best material I've ever seen is still wool. Despite all these synthetics.
Yeah, but they're all trying, and they're trying in very sophisticated and very well-funded kind of ways. I mean, you mentioned
Yeah,
the World Economic Forum and this guy Yuval, who's talking about all kinds of wild and kind of
guy's a
crazy.
loon, to put
Yeah,
it in
and
layman's terms.
that's just qualitatively different than in the past, it seems to me, and particularly when clearly there have been empires and there's countries that have failed and collapsed in the past, but there's never been a United States of America, and the complexity. I mean, you and I both have spent a lot of time in and out of this country and how I know how it works, and I'm here to tell you that this is a really complicated operation that we live
It
in the
is.
middle of. And if that comes apart in a couple or 3 years, if people quit paying their taxes, I mean, the tax receipts are down 35% this April
Are they
compared to
35%? I was
compared
wondering
to a
about
year
that the
ago.
other day. It has to be.
Yeah, compared to a year ago. And so what does that mean? That means the wisdom of crowds is that people are sussing the vibes on that one. And they're saying, I'm not paying into this. This is a losing deal. And why do you think that the IRS wanted 87,000 gun-toting agents? It's because they're losing their shirt here. And so this is on the edge of some really big time kind of stuff and the nature of big state changes like this is that in complex systems is that you get emergent kind of behavior like you're looking at down in Panama now and other kind of places, and that kind of clusters around a little bit and then it goes boom like that, and then it collects together just like when water turns to ice, for instance. You get this
Yeah. It's
transition.
funny. I often call it a phase change. That is what's happening. And this is a clear, uh, it's clear that the United States as we knew it is actually already gone. Some people just don't quite realize it. And I say that as a deeply American in my heart.
Yeah.
And like my family came to the United States before it was the United States. they actually got shipwrecked on Bermuda in 1609, right, in my eastern side. And so, I mean, I don't know anything except America other than places I travel. I don't have a family memory of, I don't know, Scotland or England or something. It's just not even there. It's been gone so long. All those memories are gone.
Yeah. Well, I feel the same thing about Denmark.
Yeah.
The only thing that's strange is the way I spell my last name, and that's the only thing I've got going with where my heritage is. Well, Michael, it's we're out of time, and it's been great to talk to you. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your us grabbing you in the middle of Panama to come and chat with us just a little bit, and we appreciate very much what you're doing and the perspective. There's an integrity and honesty associated with what you do that is really quite impressive and encouraging. And so we would encourage you to along that way. And so thanks for being with us. And for all of those of you who are viewers, thank you for being with us. And I hope that you'll pass this on and like it and do all of those kinds of things, because that's what the algorithms like, and so we got to play or playing in that space right now. So thank you, Michael Yon. Appreciate it. We can hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. Come on down to Darien.
I've been there before.
Oh, you have? Really? That's
Well,
pretty
I
intense.
used to apply for the Navy, and back when the Navy had, had access to the air station down there. We used to go down there quite fairly often. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.